So hello and welcome to Exploring Possibilities, Building Your Real-Time Career. My name is Chantal Chateauneuf and I'm the Field Marketing Manager for Epic Games in Australia and New Zealand. My own career path is full of some interesting twists and turns. Prior to joining Epic, I spent the bulk of my career working in various areas of the film industry, sales and distribution, production, industry events, and talent development. This is my very first GCAP and I'm really excited to be here. I'm also very excited for today's discussion with our panelists, touching on where real-time engine technology is at, where it's going, and where your skills are in high demand right now. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. First up, we have Dean Finnegan from Wargaming Sydney, Natalie Robinson from S1T2, and Marcus Graff from Dream Screen Australia. So I wanted to start today's panel by having all of our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the work that they're doing. So I thought perhaps Dean, you could start.
My name's Dean and I'm currently art director of Wargaming Sydney. We're a traditional game studio, an international company with studios around the world, Chicago, UK, Cyprus. The work in Sydney, we're currently working on a new IP, which is a co-development AAA game with the UK studio. So Sydney works on some big features that are integral to the gameplay, as well as some tech features that support the game as a whole. We also work on isolated tech products, which also integrate with Unreal. The game development is Unreal. We do work on isolated tech products for that get used by the studios around the world as well. So quite a collaborative experience with other studios, and Unreal is the base that we all work from. We also do prototyping in Sydney as well. So prototyping new ideas, very quick projects, very fast iteration and turnaround to see if those ideas are as good as you thought they were, and whether there's any sort of merit in those ideas to take further. And that's the work we do in Sydney.
Thanks, Dean. Natalie, did you want to go next?
Hey, I'm Nat Robinson. I work at S1T2. So S1T2 stands for Story First, Technology Second. That's kind of the approach that we take to everything we do. So in our house, we've got a lot of different developers. So we have Unreal developers, technical artists, designers, animators. We also have a web team as well. And it's really great to be able to work with so much experience in the house and be able to tackle some really interesting problems. So a lot of the work we do is, at least a lot of the work I do at S1T2 is immersive or interactive. So we do a lot of sort of interactive experiences for a range of clients, whether it's events or museums or galleries or our own sort of experience centers. So it's really fascinating what we can do with Unreal Engine because it solves so many of our issues that our clients are having. I think that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Natalie. Marcus?
Hi, I'm Marcus Graff. I'm the environment supervisor at Dream Screen Australia, where basically our main goal is to do virtual production here in Australia. And we've recently finished shoots for The Fires, which is coming out soon. And also just yesterday finished a shoot for the upcoming series La Brea, a US series, which was very interesting. And yeah, our main work is basically creating and adjusting scenes that we're putting in the background for these live shoots, which includes many actual on-set adjustments. So we're working with Unreal Engine, and most of our work is to kind of make it, first of all, work in the real frame rates that we have in real time, and then implementing on-set adjustments for directors and the DOPs, and it's a fairly new field that we're there, and yeah, it's really interesting.
Something that both Dean and Marcus touched on just at the beginning of this was this idea of rapid iteration and being able to do things really quickly. What are some of the most exciting things in your industry using these new tools that are available?
I think games has traditionally always been fast iteration. I think the cliche is, fail early and so that you can kind of throw out the bad ideas and move on to the good ideas. But also it does allow you to quickly build things very simply. You don't have to wait for sort of finished assets to come into the scene before you can actually start working with the scene, or with the files. So you can start with simple geometric objects, block things out, test it, and then if things work, then you can sort of iterate through and add that polish. Or if things are not working, you've not invested too much time, that you can quickly change things, and it's not a big deal to change things as well. So that's something that's really beneficial with real time, and it's immediate. You don't have to wait for renders. It's there in front of you. You can change lighting, you can change objects, move things around, test it, and keep moving.
Yeah, I definitely can identify with that as well, because a lot of the projects we're doing are so modular. For example, if we're working with Connect or different unique user inputs, we have to, I guess, like do rapid prototyping to figure out what is the best way to utilize this hardware or different kind of software that we're plugging into. And yeah, failing fast to find a solution and figure out how to make it work first, the skeleton, and then building upon that and making it a beautiful experience from there.
And for us, the fast iteration stuff is the very essence of what we're trying to do, or like it's basically our business model in a way. Just an example from yesterday is where we kind of bounced in, and then the day before the shoot, Wednesday, like the director actually came to kind of see our stuff, and they were like, "Oh, that's cool. Can we change this? Yes. Can we change that? Yeah. Can we change the ocean speed, for example?" We're like, "Oh, no, we haven't implemented that yet." So like I implemented these tools within like half an hour or an hour to kind of be able to shoot on the next day. So all this stuff wouldn't have been, there. And then like the actual on-set work that we're doing with Unreal is very much while they're kind of framing a shot, for example, we're kind of like, can we put a rock there, which is the easiest thing. And then it's other things. It's like, oh, can we like change like the quality of this? Oh, we have a flicker there. Can we kind of, change the samples of that? And oh, the director wants, like a little bit more light under the clouds. And with the new cloud system, we can just do these changes on set. And like, they're all blown away by, the interactivity that we can do. And yeah, that's our main thing why we chose Unreal, for example, because not just the engine is advanced, but the tooling is what actually counts for us, right? That like me as a non-programmer can just quickly whip up something in Blueprints and just add functionality in it. That's just super amazing.
Yeah, that actually kind of dovetails really nicely to my next question, because Marcus, you really touched on this idea of change. And what I wanted to ask all of you is, with, the growth of real-time technology, how would you say that your roles have changed?
Well, to be honest, like for my role, I'm not really sure what I am at the moment, to be honest, because I'm coming from a very traditional VFX background and, joined the ranks from like a normal artist to a senior to a lead, and like in the most traditional way, I would be a supervisor now. I'm also the actual artist on the whole thing, but in the future it will probably change. And then there's like the traditional workflows where with the stuff that I'm doing for example, I think the whole industry right now tries to figure out how to fit these things together, and how, like there's film lingo, and then there's like VFX lingo, and then there's game lingo, and you're kind of trying to, like, if I would say I'm an environment supervisor on set, that would mean something entirely different. So like we kind of agreed on the virtual environment supervisor at the moment, but like it's at the same time, it could also just be an artist. So I think the roles itself are just like evolving at the moment. And to make absolutely sure who does what and what it is will probably take another year or more to kind of solidify itself.
Yeah, I think Marcus hit the nail on the head there. I think the essence is that things are fluid and things are changing so rapidly. You know, when I had a very similar path of you know, working up senior lead into art direction, and there's a high degree of technicality to the work now, but that really doesn't negate any sort of creative or artistic sort of knowledge or interpretation. That will always come first. But obviously the thing that you're working in, you know, which is a real-time engine, you need that knowledge to know how to get the best out of it, and in order to allow the artwork to stay at that highest quality, there's a high degree of technicality to get that as efficient as it can be. Certainly for games where frame rate is everything, you know, once everything comes into a game or a real-time experience, if it runs at 1 frame a second, it's a pointless it ever been an experience. It just isn't an experience. So, you know, as an artist, to make that world immersive and suspend that disbelief of that world that you've created, it's got to be pretty seamless in the experience that that person has. So no technical glitches or frame dropping. So I do feel that over time the role of an artist is becoming more technical. Your knowledge of your tools is really, you know, you can't just kind of throw 8K textures in there, you know, like hundreds of them, and expect it to get a 60 frames per second. So you need to know about optimization, you know, what's immediately in close to the camera, what's at the background, those creative decisions that you're making, but while being technical at the same time. So that's a big difference that I see, and how my role has changed as well.
And that blurs it even more, right? That line, because it's kind of, yeah, you've been an artist and now you're kind of doing so much technical stuff that it really borders that TD kind of thing, but then you're not advanced enough to call yourself the TD, but you know, but that's what I actually love about it. It just all comes together.
What do you think, Natalie? Just because, I mean, the very name S1T2 speaks to this idea of fusing, you know, art, story, and technology.
I feel like every project we're having to like reinvent, you know, I agree with what you said, Dean, like you need that sort of base foundation, that 10,000 hours of sort of skill within the engine and knowing your tools and knowing how to do everything. But from there, it's sort of limitless what you can do. And so every project we're trying to use that tool to its limits, trying to see what it can do. For example, we're using a very complicated scene at the moment on a very large scale canvas, and just seeing stuff like frame rate issues and just where one of the sides just needs to be optimized. So we're optimizing right now to try and get this higher frame rate, but you know, it causes some other issues. So, but I mean, a year from now, I'm pretty sure we're not going to have the issue we're seeing today, which is so exciting because we can get bigger and better activations. And yeah, it's crazy how fast things are moving, which allow us to do such like things 2 years ago I wouldn't have even dreamed of. So yeah, it's super exciting. But yes, do your basics first. That foundation of skill is so important because there's so many gotchas that'll get you.
Yeah, I think, Natalie, that's a really good point. Because I mean, we live in this magic wonderland nowadays. It's like, I just remember when I was starting to, you know, get my first, you know, copy, let's say, for 3ds Max when I was 15. It's like there was no internet. Like my learning curve was so steep because I thought, yeah, I had to buy a book, and these were like super rare at that time as well. And now it's like you have this amazing tool for free with like Kixel stuff for free, you know, and like, but it's really easy to kind of just go in and try out for yourself. But people tend to forget that there's a few basics that will help you along the way later. And it's easy to just, jump start it and forget about these. And it will haunt you at one point. Like if you don't know your basic, it will come back to you, definitely.
If you were offering advice to new graduates in terms of the kinds of skills that they should be cultivating to be successful in the kinds of roles that you're all in, what would you say? What would your advice be?
I mean, it's part of the same conversation. I think for any new graduate, the creativity, that skill and understanding, that knowledge of, color theory, composition, proportion, that will always remain, I think, because we do work in a visual industry, and whoever's consuming it, they're either experiencing it as an immersive experience, whether it be a game or even if it's what Marcus is doing for film, it's still a highly visual kind of industry. So that will never disappear. I think it's understanding the tools that you're working in and just not being closed down with your approaches. As we said, things move so quickly. I mean, a year ago, Unreal really was tiptoeing into the film industry, and now it's charging through that space, which is amazing to see those changes. And it's understanding your tools, problem solving, even making games. I've been doing it since kind of the early 90s, and there's no template for making a game. Every day changes, over that period. And even if you think you've solved a certain approach, guaranteed the next day there'll be a different problem, and you've got to solve your way through it creatively and technically. So I think, don't rely on a kind of set way of doing things. Keep open, keep learning, and apply that creativity to it.
You can't deny like just that 10,000 hours of experience of just honing in on that craft, finding what you're really interested in the engine or in development in general, and just get into it. Like a lot of grads that I've interviewed over the years, they're so passionate and they have such great ideas and they're really motivated, and it's so awesome. But you just need to make your own game or have your own little projects and just like figure out how you would actually approach that at a prototype level, just to see what you can get out of it and sort of showcase that skill. And yeah, like kind of like what you said, Dean, just curiosity, because you can get really pigeonholed in other industries, but I feel like in this one, you get really T-posed, so you can get really deep in one area of your niche, but then you still have to touch everything around you. So just an openness to learning tech that isn't necessarily your thing is super valuable, especially with what we're working on at S1T2, where you will get thrown into the deep end on something you've never dreamt of. And you may not like it, but you will probably, if like the people that we hire are really just open to, all right, let's challenge, I'll take it on, I'll try and figure out this new tracking software or something like that. And also just remember who you're making your thing for. It's for a user. So never forget that for the end of the day, someone is going to be interacting or experiencing or living inside what you've created. So never forget how that experience works and get intimate with your user.
Yeah, I think a good analogy is probably when you ask a photographer, like what camera you should get. And they always tell you is like, don't invest in the body, invest in the lenses, right? Because the body will change every 1 year or two, like years, just go not something out, but like good glass is like, good quality glass is like the thing that persists. And with this, it's the same. I think like the brushes, the brushes that you create your art, like they don't really change, they just get digital in a way. But you still need to learn like how to use it to make art. And the things that I think are important is that you need to love what you're doing and spend the time, as both said already. It's kind of like the 10,000 hours, that's important. But the other part of it is like you need to take a little bit of your time from that, let's say 20% or so, to spread your knowledge around stuff. Like one example is that most of my time that I spent on set the last few days were just in Unreal doing artistic stuff. But at one point we realized that our computer wouldn't connect to the multi-user system that runs the stuff on the panels. So, and we couldn't figure out why. So I needed to get another computer and transfer my graphics card, my hard drive, and my RAM into this machine, and like do it fairly quickly. And even if you're an artist that never opened up a computer, it's still good to kind of have these skills when you sometimes you need to be able to solve your own problems rather than always relying on like an IT person or like a TD. So it goes through all these things. So yeah, you can't become a specialist in everything, but knowing a little bit of everything is not the worst thing.
I think on top of that as well, is that speaking purely for artists, new graduates from an artist point of view, that experience is not isolated anymore. You will be working with designers, programmers, engineers, product managers. So having that collaborative outlook in all that you do is really important as well. I think an understanding, which is what we've all talked about, is understanding where the other disciplines, where their thinking is coming from, and you'll only get the best product by you all working together. So that's really important, is that understanding other disciplines, and if you've got that little bit of knowledge, then you can come meet each other and solve the same problem, but from different perspectives. So that's important.
I'm going to jump in with a question specifically for Natalie. So you work with a lot of programmers in your role. What's some advice you could give programmers on working in this kind of collaborative environment? This idea that we're not kind of working in silo anymore, that we're working with people from all of these different fields.
I guess, yeah, it's just an openness and curiosity to empathizing with another developer's set of tools or what the challenges they're going through are. Just sort of understanding the peripheries of what you're working on. So a lot of the work we do, you own your module, you develop a thing and that's your piece of code where you integrate it with other people. But integration is such a fun part of the project where things can definitely go wrong. But if you are talking the entire time, so you need to communicate from the very beginning how you're planning out this architecture and this development, so that by the time it comes to touch your code, no surprises will happen. There's always surprises though, right? And that's also part of it, is just being able to go with the flow a little bit, work through these problems that you never thought would have been happening. No matter how confident you were that nothing would happen, there's always something unexpected, especially when you're dealing with on-site activity as well at events and that sort of thing, where you can't replicate some of the issues that you're going to have, like, for example, the sun, or it's really hot. That's where I am right now in Dubai. It's very, very hot. And there are definitely complications that you have never thought of, which is fun and challenging, but you work as a team to get through it.
I just think it creates a really interesting juxtaposition, this idea of a lot of how what you're doing is very site specific, whereas what Marcus is doing, you can play around with things like the sun in terms of lighting and changing things around, and iterating within the engine. So
yeah, but we have other site specific problems then as well.
Exactly.
For example, if the director tries to, like now they just implemented 2 frustum cameras, and if the director now wants 3 cameras and stuff like this. So the challenges remain.
Absolutely. So speaking of challenges, what would you say are some of the misconceptions that you often encounter that people have about your respective industries?
For games specifically, they can be long projects. They can be kind of 3-year projects. So so visually, you know, you're seeing the same thing again and again and again for a long time. And you've just got to understand that you know, you might want to move on, but the project is really involves a lot of people working collaboratively together. There's often, you know, well over 100 people working on game development, and that's then broken down into features. You might not touch it, for games specifically, you might not touch all of the project. You might just be concerned with a small part of the project, but everybody's small part comes together to make the whole. So I think it's understand the industry that you're potentially wanting to go in, understanding what that work is and how you experience that work. Like and I think boundaries, like we were talking earlier, are kind of breaking down. You know, what was years ago seen as this is the film industry and this is the game industry, and you know, neither the twain shall meet, is definitely really crossing over now. And originally, as an animator, I was able to, you know, spend time in games which were long projects, and then go to film, which was, you know, a relatively longish project, and then go to sort of commercials or cinematics, which are really kind of intense, quick projects as well. But it's like, just be prepared for understanding, you know, what the industries could entail. And as a visual artist, if you get sick of something after a week, but you're going to be on it for 3 years, you've got to understand that, you know, what that work is. I think that's an interesting sort of idea of how your creative input is for different projects as well.
Yeah, for us, I would say it's probably like the biggest thing with VFX in general is probably that people think it's a bit more glorious than it actually is. And what I experienced, like firsthand, being on set now since a few months now for the first time, that it's actually not like it's kind of, I think I had a different idea of like how set life works and like the whole interaction with people work, and like it's how, like, you know, like there's a very crazy hierarchy, for example, and like how different people are actually compared to like where I came from before. But in terms of the actual work, it's probably like a bit too early for me to tell, because like I'm just in like, because we're fairly new into this whole world. But I kind of see that film people like are still trying to, like, it's not a misconception, but rather like a wondering of, you know, like what the nerds are doing. So like they're just trying to figure out like what we do, like who we are, and like how to talk to us, because it was like a very specific, I think that they used to deal with like a very specific type of hierarchy, and like, you know, people that are doing very specific things, and now there's like this big unknown. And yeah, I think that's the thing that we're gonna have to deal, and also to educate a little bit, like in the next coming years.
I think that, as you know, with Unreal really making that headway, you know, like you look at the work that we all do, it's quite diverse, but there's a sort of common ground that is really starting to get there and spread across those industries. So that common language is starting to develop now, which is really great. So that ability to, you know, for sort of traditional people working in films to communicate with more real time, because now they're in that space and they're understanding, you know, how to output from a real-time engine. There's commonalities. I guess there's more commonalities coming through than differences, which is really interesting.
And the amazing thing about this is that every person that I've seen walking away from a virtual production set, for example, you could see that like something started, you know, like some gears started turning in their head. Like not just the directors and whatever, even the actors, they kind of that saw it, and people that are on set just looking at this thing, and like everybody just like nobody just walked away kind of like, you know, not giving it, but they were like everybody was always already kind of thinking is like, okay, how is this going to affect me? Like what's, you know, like what's possible with it? How is the industry going to change? Because I think everybody's seeing that there is a change coming. Like, and not just for film, but like what you said, that Dean, about, you know, like how games and film and all this content creation will merge into each other in a way. And I think, I mean, that has been Epic's what do you say, like phrase for a bit, right, with the metaverse. Yeah, and I can totally see this happening on many different levels.
One of the things that I wanted to ask was kind of ties into what you were just saying, Marcus, is what do you think is possible now with this technology that wasn't possible before?
We're probably still a few years away from like this complete merger and immersion, but I mean, when you see Unreal 5 and you kind of see what's already possible, but you also see the limitations that are still there, and regarding its early access. But like I'm already saying is like Unreal 5 is going to be great, but like what I'm really excited about is like Unreal 7 or something like that, where I'm just kind of, you know, like when you see the huge leaps everything makes, and now we can actually animate in Unreal, which is something that's really, as a more film oriented person, then that's like a huge thing for me. You know, and things like kind of, I want to develop my own, you know, little trailer thing and just put it on the internet and see how that, if it goes viral or not, that would be like a huge undertaking, like a year ago, 2 years ago. And now this is like, it comes closer and closer to the reality of, you know, like you can do it alone or with 5 people or like with a few friends helping. So yeah, I think it's gonna rapidly evolve. Like the evolution is gonna go on for a bit.
There are things that are still the sort of holy grail of real time. Things like cloth, muscle systems, hair is really, you know, making significant inroads in that. More dynamic environments with weather systems and being able to sort of dynamically change as well is that sort of nirvana of real time that you can do in film, because it's offline and it's pre-rendered and you can do what you like with it, basically. So I think that's, you know, you can definitely see that progression coming through already in, you know, on Unreal 5. It's, you know, setting up flora and fauna to interact with wind systems, you know, that you can dynamically change and they respond to it. And so that becomes a real-time experience. It's something that you don't have to animate and pre-bake anymore, and that's what you're stuck with. It's like, that's the beauty of real-time, is that it's all part of a dynamic real-time system that is responding to something like a wind system. So that's something that there's still challenges, and, you know, a lot of that work, for example, with muscle systems, it's still smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of cheating to make it look like muscles are deforming, or, you know, cloths deforming, that kind of thing. But purely from an animation point of view, which is really my passion and how I entered into the industry, and I really still have that passion about it. Just the inroads recently in the rigging system and animation system, you know, the fact that you can quite closely just do it all within Unreal, and you know, a big sort of time eater is having to jump out into other packages, prepare things, bring it, and the engine was always seen as the assembly. It's almost like, you know, that's where everything comes together and you experience it. But now Unreal is definitely, you know, this is not just where everything comes together, this is where everything's created as well. So that's really making big changes. So, you know, you don't have to jump out and animate in other software and export it and bring it back in. And if something goes wrong, you have to jump out. It's like, it's all in there. It's all in in Unreal. And so that's pretty exciting. And allowing, you know, character artists and modelers to work almost side by side with the animators, and not one is waiting for the other. So that sort of non-linear workflows where people can just work side by side and not, you know, I've done my character model, let's pass it on to the rigger, let's pass it on to the animator, and everybody's waiting. It's everything's just happening as a workflow side by side. So that's quite interesting as well.
I actually believe that things like effects and animation will probably be the one, like the departments that will benefit from it the most at the point. Because what we are kind of seeing in the traditional industry is, but traditional meaning like, you know, we're only around for 40 years or so, but you kind of see clients demanding fast iterations, and they're kind of this like, hey, why are you doing this animatic still in gray? You know, like you also kind of see the minds evolving. So, but that actually changes now that people are asking for it. So there's definitely going to be a huge need coming in, and yeah, studios will scramble to kind of, you know, get that fulfilled.
That's really tricky, right? Because when you're trying to get people on board with the creative or design of your thing that you're creating, you really only want them to focus on one thing at a time, right? So having everything all at once and it's like almost finished glory, that's going to be quite challenging to manage, because yeah, it's a lot to handle.
I think it's interesting, you know, I guess it's always problems within the creative industry is you want to iterate fast and test things and show the client, and often things don't look the finished thing, and you know, after 3 weeks, and it's trying to take them on that journey to say, yes, this is grey box and it's not going to be the final look of it. But so it's almost like there's a little piece of the jigsaw that you show to the client and go, you know, add all these together, and you've somehow got to get them to visualize what it's going to look like. But you can't really be fast iterating and have finished artwork, because you'll just move really slow. So it is a problem of trying to communicate, you know, with your client what they're trying to look at any one time. I think that's always been a problem.
That's really exciting. So just as a particular example, so Natalie, for instance, you know, with S1T2, I know you do a lot of sculpture work and use XR for design iteration and that sort of thing. One of the questions that I had for all of you is, what skills do game developers have that are applicable to your various industries?
I guess the skills that we're really looking for people straight out is the ability to sort of have enough foundational skills to be able to prototype quickly in order to create something. So for example, if we are prototyping for, we could be prototyping for a different type of activation. So there's lots of physical activations or sculptural things that we do, which we will put in virtual reality first, just to see how does it feel, what does it look like. It's still not as close as reality, but it's the closest you've got where you're in lockdown in a studio on the other side of the country or other side of the world. So being able to, yeah, prototype is probably the first thing is, yeah, can you play with prototypes, put things together and make something work at a very basic level?
Dean, any thoughts?
I think it's, you know, with any 3D artist, it's Unreal makes it really easy to get things in there and see things straight away. I think the real development skills come in when you've got a whole city that needs to run at 60 frames a second, and how you optimize and maintain that quality. So for example, some of the games, past games I've worked on, it requires a city to be populated by characters. So it would just take years to model each character in isolation. So you basically break it down and look at how you can modularize. So you build a population based on 10 sets of trousers or pants if you're in Australia, 10 different types of body, a variety of heads and a variety of footwear. And by mixing and matching, you get a variety of populations. So I think that games is much more long term. So I'm sure somebody like Marcus or even Natalie, if you've got a 2-month or a month project, you can't really invest in the tools and systems to generate thousands of assets, because you just don't have time. You just have to get down and do it. But games, if you've got to create a full city of buildings, things are changing where you no longer model each building in isolation, but you look at procedurally, how do you generate a city by components of windows and doors and roofs, and the tools assemble those buildings to be put into engine. And that's the work that the artists are doing in wargaming. We call them tech artists. It goes back to Marcus in that the naming is just kind of a real misnomer. It's artists that are real technical and looking into systems of, creating one house, great, but we need 1,000 houses. How do you do that in 3 months? So this is the problem of wanting artists that are really technically minded, that can start building systems to expand out when you've got a lot of assets as well. So I mean, that's the thing I can think of. But games has that luxury because the longer term, and you know that you need 10 different environments that are pretty massive and require lots of assets. But if you're working on a 2-month cinematic, you just don't have that luxury. But still, how I think the artist role, maybe not in it to that extreme, you're always looking at the best way of doing things and problem solving. Do I sit down and really create all these things individually, or is there a way of populating it? I mean, some of the sort of bizarre creative things is this was a real-time cinematic as well, and we wanted a whole army of characters charging down a hill, and we baked out the run cycles and then attached them to a particle system that flowed down the hill. So it's that sort of creative problem solving that is just from really out of nowhere, and you end up just getting really great results as well, rather than say, I'm going to animate each individual character running down the hill. Time was short, so how can you still make it look impressive, but in much better ways?
Yeah, I think to stay in game terms is like, if you're a cheater, you're probably like a good fit. Like for me, it's fairly, actually almost a bit boring to say, but it's kind of the skills is like, in the really, the first thing you gotta have is the basics, the real-time basics, the standard basic software like Maya, Blender, Max, whatever it is. Just because projects are usually kind of a bit rushed. At least what we feel like, what we have now at the moment is that usually we don't get 6 months to kind of create. We're also like not existing not only existing that long, but the thing is like that's very rare at the moment, that you get a project where it's like, oh yeah, we were doing something next year, can you start preparing for it? Usually it's kind of like, yeah, we kind of have no other way to do this, so like, can you help us? And yeah, by the way, it's in 3 weeks, and you're like, all right, we'll try to do the best that we can, and we're happy to do that, of course. But in an environment like this is like, if you bring on someone new, you're happy to teach, you know, like, but you can't start at the very basics. Like you need to have someone that kind of at least like speaks the same language as you. So that's, for me, that's the first thing that you got to master in a way. Well, not master, but at least, you know, be at a level where you kind of see is like, okay, somebody's willing to learn. That's like, for me, the second thing is like, rather than having the basics, is like the attitude of someone really kind of trying to buy into it and do it. That's one of the most important things. Having said that, is like stuff like Houdini doesn't hurt, touching on the procedural generation, you know, when it goes fast, when you need to cheat, when you need to kind of do things that look way more complex than, you know, they are. And that's where usually software like Houdini comes in. Yeah, like whenever you kind of, as soon as you learn how to cheat things like motion blur, like radial motion blur, stuff like that, or I don't know, volumetric kind of clouds. We had this one thing where we had to get with a spotlight had to get through fog really quick that just wouldn't keep up. So we developed this cone that will have a few Fresnel shaders that like react to the camera. And it's like, you know, it's the typical math programming stuff, but you need to have a little bit of a mindset on like how you can shortcut your way through it. Then yeah, technical optimization skills are always needed and wanted and highly thought after. But the very last thing for me is kind of personal skills in a way. And I think that's getting touched on too less, is like you need to, you know, like it's about how people react in high pressure situations, like how nice you can still be, even, you know, how to deal with people that probably, you know, asking a thing too much of you just in the heat of the night, and know that it's like, you know, the job and not like a personal thing. Like it's a little bit like a chef in a kitchen sometimes. Yeah. And, you know, just like I had this, I met this guy in Singapore that was a aspiring artist from a school. And he was just like, yeah, I want to break into the industry and whatever. And I'm doing all of this kind of stuff. And but he was never going out, never meeting people, you know, never having a drink. And I'm just like, hey, some of the actual, you know, chances that I got is because I kind of made friends with, or like I got along well with like people that, you know, then kind of gave me a recommendation like 5 years later or something, you know. And like, I think that's a very, like, that's what I always tell people, is kind of like, don't just focus like only on like all the technical aspects and what we're talking about, is like, you know, try to also, you know, be nice to have around with, if that is the right, I'm not really sure
Yeah,
if I'm saying
totally
it's right,
agree with
but you
that.
know what I mean.
Yeah. So that's almost all we have time for. So I did want to give the last word to Natalie. Did you have any major, if you wanted students and recent grads to take away one thing from this talk, what would it be? You know, whether that's to do with real-time tech, whether that's to do with the possibilities that are out there, what would it be?
Put work into your fundamentals and basics, get your foundation, always be curious and open to learning new things, whether that's technical, artistic, or, you know, user experience based, anything, because you'll use that information in ways you'll never think of today, but tomorrow you'll be applying that knowledge. And yeah, always remember your user, get intimate with, what are you doing this for? Don't forget that part, because you can get really into the details, but at the end of the day, you're creating something for someone or for yourself or for a user and audience. So think about what they're thinking so that you make the right decisions artistically and programmatically. Yeah.
I think that's a really great note to end on. And I just wanted to thank all of our panelists so much. Natalie, Dean, and Marcus, we really appreciate your time and insight today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be posting contact details for all of our panelists today if you have any follow-up questions for them. And I will be actually hosting a panel discussion as part of GCAP Invest immediately after this session. And my colleague Chris Murphy will be hosting an Intro to Tech Art talk over in the Unreal Engine booth at 4 o'clock today. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of GCAP.